walk out to the show and fall at your door. We got that info for you. Touch out on that plane and buy anything. More than just a podcast for you.
But I do want to ask this because I think you're getting into it. Where does the business of soccer recruiting get done? I hear people talk about school soccer versus club soccer, and now I've learned academy. But where does the business of recruiting get done? Where can a parent or an athlete say, "All right, this is where we need to go to get a look"?
That's a there's lots of answers to that one question. And to go back to what you were saying is that
Top five.
yeah, soccer is
So
completely
many
different in
options.
terms of education. We're different than volleyball, football, basketball. It's funny because the coaches here, none of them have an organization where they have to get licensed to coach. I think we're the only one that actually you have to get a certain license to be able to coach. Everyone else, like that, it's just from experience or playing at a good level, that their son or daughter started to play baseball or softball and they want to coach. But for me, and we talked about this last time, it's going to be the club because I don't care if it's Division One, Division Two, Division Three, NAIA. Everyone has a recruiting budget, and if you look at the recruiting budget of all of these schools, I can go to a club tournament and I can see 500 players. I can go to one high school game and see maybe 25. So if I know that I have a certain amount of money and I can only see a certain amount of players, I'm going to go to a club event, to one of the showcases, whether it's big, small. So I know I can see 500 plus kids, all in one setting. If I go to high school, I'm going to see one game. I'm going to see, 11 versus 11 and plus a couple subs. So maybe 25 to 30 players at the most. So when you talk about bang for your buck, it's going to be at the club level. Now, I'll be the first one as a high school coach. High school does have a part in the recruiting process. I'm right now helping 3 of our girls try to find a place, and they're 2022s. They're not even 2021s, and it's completely different process because of COVID. I know we'll get into that a little bit later in the show, but it's flipped everything upside down, and I think we're going to see an impact not just on the 2022s, the 2023s, and even like you were saying, the 2024s are going to be impacted by what's going on now in terms of their recruiting roles.
Absolutely.
So to me, it all goes down to your best bet is a couple things is to get your small highlight video, get the coaches that you're interested in, get into a club event, that you can be seen. I know right now, like we have a couple of our girls are playing the ECNL down in Florida. Because of the rules, Division One, they can't be there. But guess what? They're all sitting on their laptop just like we are right now, and they're watching tons of games. That's how recruiting is going right now for the Division Ones. Is recruiting doesn't stop for them. They just have to find a different way. They can't have the ID camps like we did in the past where people could go and go, okay, great, I really want to see about the school. Right now they're sitting on their laptop. They're watching games. They're continuing to watch games. Recruiting is never going to stop if you're a college coach, whether you're Division One, Division Two, Division Three, or NAIA. I think the other thing that parents need to realize is forget about the divisions. Find the right fit for you. That's what we preach here. Is there are some great NAIA teams that can beat Division One. There's some Division Three teams that can beat Division One. Find the right fit for you. And sometimes that's hard, but sometimes it's also just educating the parents, the players, the coaches of figuring out what is the best path. And I think that's why we're here, is to try to help them start that path and that journey together of here's the first steps you need to do.
Okay. So Nate, for you, where's the business of recruiting get done?
Curtis already touched on the AD camps. Actually, he talked about watching club and high school games. It's one of my favorite stories. We never did get him to help us with coaching, but one of the teachers at Lead Academy was a D1 goalie, and the coach that was recruiting him wasn't able to make it to his club season, so he's like, I'm going to come down for one of your high school games. And you keep in mind, this kid at the time is being recruited to be a goalkeeper, but he also happened to be one of the best players on his high school team. There were only like 2 travel team players on this entire high school team. So when this coach comes down to watch this guy get recruited for goalkeeper, he is out there wearing the number 10 jersey, running around attacking midfield, out there on the field. The coach waited through the whole game just so at the end he could be like, if I'm ever going to come to one of your games, you need to make sure you're in goal. Do not waste my time. And then drove back to the university. He still took him, but see, like that's, again, we talked about that disparity. ID camps are huge for high school players, and they're still cost prohibitive. Like, so that's one of the things, is that like frequently I'm looking for an ID camp where multiple schools are going to be represented. Actually, I know that at Trevecca Nazarene University, the women's coach used to be an assistant at Lipscomb. The reason why they were able to get her was because the previous head coach at Trevecca didn't run an ID camp at the time. What he did was he made Trevecca become a partnering school with Lipscomb, because I mean, who cares? It's a 10-minute drive. And so Lipscomb being a D1 school and Trevecca being a D2 school, the Lipscomb coaches at the end of a weekend of ID camp would say, these are the players that we're not going to look at. If you're interested in any of them, let us know. And they'd hand off all the rest of the players. And so he could recruit all these players that were D1 good, but just probably not going to make the Lipscomb team, as a D2 coach. But that was how he met her. So we had a direct recommendation. So our current coach does run ID camps, because she was actually the one running those camps as the assistant. And so they have still worked on getting ID camps in, but you know, across the nation, colleges are different states. Some are almost exclusively virtual, some are entirely virtual. Soccer itself was actually greatly impacted. There were a lot of leagues that, of course, didn't do it in the fall. Now are, you know, conferences and whatnot that are now trying to figure out how to move soccer to be a spring sport for just this year, but still hoping to resume fall. So they would have 2 seasons in 2021, because they'll have their college season this spring, and then they'll go back to resuming their regular schedule season. And also that's another thing, and we talked about it, I think, before you started recruiting a little bit. Ahmad mentioned that you know, being in season right now, and of course my players aren't in season. In Florida, the high school season was in the winter. In Tennessee, there are alternating seasons for soccer between women's and men's. So like our girls were playing in the fall, our guys will hopefully be playing in the spring. They didn't get to do that last spring, and then of course with how numbers are going, I'm really hoping they get to this spring. Like, I mean, like that's definitely something weighing heavy on me, and I'm pretty sure it's weighing heavy on Curtis too, because it yeah. Doesn't look good. And to lose 2 seasons for these guys, that had a huge impact on recruiting. I had a guy who was about to break our record for goal scoring and didn't get to have his senior season. So instead of going to college, he moved back to Mexico to work.
That's awful. And this is why I'm having this show, because parents don't know what to do. They don't know what their options are. So I wanted to tee 2021 up with what are our options? So I'm going to ask, Ahmed, for you, where does the business of recruiting get done? And I need to point this out for those parents who are not familiar with soccer or who are just getting started in soccer. What is an ID team? Did I say that right? An ID team?
ID camp.
An ID camp. Yes, an ID camp. What's an ID camp?
Okay. Thanks, Carson. I think y'all are hitting some great points. I want to make sure I'm keeping it plain and clear too. So where does the business get done? 2-part question, right? And then what is an ID camp?
Yeah.
Okay. I think for me, and I'm just going to speak on both sides, as a player, it happens when the coach wants you and finds you. When I mean wants you and finds you, that's given. The world was normal as we knew it. There were clubs that can go to tournaments. There are certain tournaments that any club wants to get to. right? There are, I don't want to say too much back in the day, like I'm super old, but there are Nike Cups. There are, those are in Oregon where, the base and foundation of Nike is. There's a Disney Showcase at the Worldwide of Sports, um, or Disney World of Sports. There is Dallas Cup. So those are big, buzzword names for the soccer community to get to. And the business could happen there at your hotel room. It could be a call. As a player, the business didn't happen for me until every coach, I think, like Curtis mentioned, um, you know, every coach got to that a tournament at Disney Showcase. They saw everything they needed to see in Dallas and Texas and Tennessee, or maybe Texas, North Carolina, Florida, and then there were a few players in Tennessee and Mississippi, right? That they, all right, we need to get this manager's coach's confirmation, then I'll make calls over the weekend, and they do. So it's not, it is definitely not an 8 to 5 thing. I've talked to coaches as late as 10, 11, sometimes after midnight. And we sat by the phone. And I do mean the actual house phone. Because if you didn't, yes, I out there, no shit, because you didn't use it. We need your house number. It was when you used pretty much AOL email. They sent emails to your parent, whatever they had at any point at that time, and that was how it got done. If you missed a call, you missed an opportunity, pretty much, unless they really wanted you. So that was then. The business now, and I think I'm gonna hit a little bit on COVID, if that's okay. It's gonna look completely different because what tournaments are anyone allowed to go to, and if you're allowed to go to them, what colleges are not risking NCAA violations to go see them? D1 is in a dead period until April 15th or April 2021. JUCOs are okay to recruit. I think D2 and D3 just got their restrictions released here at the end of 2020. So there are so many, balls juggling in the air for how to do business. But like our Curtis says, it just has to be different. They're not done working. It's just answering the question for a lot of coaches: how do we need to work? And I think for coaches where we are, the work is a little bit, not that we should not have always been doing this, but I think we have to kind of dive into the other duties as assigned to get our players looked at now, especially because they're like, like you say, James, they're like there are parents and there are moms and there are dads who just do not know what the recruiting process looks like, period. So we have to step in and be like, okay, if you don't have social media, if you don't have this, you have that, we need to get it done, and we need to get it done fast. If you have better camera equipment, you're a step ahead. If you have contacts and relationships, you're a step ahead. So the business could still be done anywhere, but it will have to look different because you have a pandemic that's changing the world as we know it.
What's an ID? An I.
Thank you.
I'm gonna get
that ID camp.
Yeah.
I'll do it real quick.
Go ahead.
So ID, identifying.
There you
schools
go.
run their own. And so the thing is, like, if you have a target school, reach out to the school. Reach out. You're probably going to find out who the assistant coaches are, but reach out to a school and ask them if they have an ID camp coming up. They probably have a day or a couple evenings, maybe drive in, especially now because schools aren't hosting people on campus. And so a lot of ID camps used to be like a Friday, Saturday or Saturday, Sunday type thing. And you would pay X amount of dollars. You still get the full campus tour experience and all that stuff. But then you go out there, you work with the coaches, maybe a few players, kind of get to experience what it is to be out on the field there. And they get to experience seeing you out on the field there. Now, for like my high school players, that's their only chance. No one's coming to our games. Shoot, I can't get the parents to come to our games. But
are they
of course,
allowed to
some
come?
of that is just a little bit of concern because I have a lot of migrant parents. Well, I mean, even when they're allowed to come, I have a lot of migrant parents that just in the current climate of our nation weren't feeling particularly comfortable with being out. And so I have never sent a high school player to an ID camp where I didn't get a follow-up from the coach. But they were never going to be seen if we didn't bridge that gap and create that contact. because my kids couldn't afford to join these club teams. And it was before Nashville really began to have, once they started talking Nashville SC, once we got into like the pre-stages of having an MLS team, we started talking academy. Barcelona actually has an academy here in town because they have numerous locations across the United States now. I think they have something like 16 locations now. Nashville ended up becoming one of them. And so the Barcelona Academy functions out at Ensworth. And so like now there are more academies in the area. So I do have kids I'm trying to like at least get involved in the academy process, right? So they have more chances. But if we have kids that work hard, it's easy for me to get a hold of a coach and say, when do you have an ID camp? And then just send my kids out there. And every time that my players go to an ID camp, yeah, they get looks. Because the truth is they can hold their own. I'm not sending the back end of my bench anyway. They can hold their own, but no, they were never going to be seen if we didn't go through the process. And so, you know, and I don't have parents that have like the high end cameras like you see at other places where like, see, I coach varsity basketball here in this state too. And so like at the basketball games, we have the parents, nothing quite like watching a parent with a whole dang 12-inch iPad standing in the stands, right? But like they're running it on 4K and they're running it just on their kid in this basketball game. And so they're sending video to all the time. Also, another thing is for soccer, because of the size of the field and the fact that you're not back and forth all the time, they're a lot more cool with highlights when they're recruiting as coaches. For basketball as a coach, when I had coaches reach out to me, they always ask for a complete game. Well, yeah, because there's a repetition of opportunities. Even a great soccer player may only get 6 or 7 worthwhile opportunities over the course of an 80-minute high school game to have a goal scoring chance. So like the coach doesn't want to sit through all 80 minutes to watch like how well they did out of their 6 great chances. And so so highlight videos do help in those instances. But yeah, like it's about resourcing, and there's honestly no better resource than showing up and working your tail off. And so my kids that understand that, we're willing to put a little bit of money into an ID camp to go to the school that we wanted to go to anyway, so that we can be on their field and they can see us. Yeah, we'll do it. But right now,
So I want to
you
ask.
can let us come.
So I want to ask this question. So an ID camp is similar to like a football or basketball camp. Maybe anybody can pay to go. You just have to know when it's going to be. And,
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good. Different terminology.
So
this is the part where I talk to my parents. So parents, if you are listening closely, you have learned a couple of things. One, you've learned that smaller schools or D2, D3, D1, they partner. So you may take your child to Belmont or to UT Knoxville to an ID camp, but there may be coaches from other schools where they have partnerships, where coaches have relationships. I want you to listen to them talk about relationships where a coach will say, hey, I'm not going to take this kid, so you can have them. So just know that going to an ID camp for one school, don't get discouraged, because that camp can give multiple schools and multiple coaches the opportunity to look at your son or daughter, and they may have opportunities that they never even considered because they show up. There's something to be said for showing up when you can show up. The other thing that I want you to think about, and this is something that we as parents and as athletes don't always think about, they talked about making phone calls. Call the school, check the website. If you don't ask, the answer is always no. So coaches are not trying to hide. And picking up the phone or using your cell phone to ask relevant questions. When's your ID camp? How much does it cost? That's a huge thing. Just know they want you to call. They will answer. May not be the head coach, but someone in the athletic department is going to answer. So relationships and connections that you make on your own. Take that away from this part of the discussion, because I'm glad you guys highlighted it. Most parents really don't know that they can actually pick up the phone and make a phone call.
Right.
And so this is huge, especially during now, where people are like, what do I do? Who do I call? Who do I talk to? And some coaches, like you pointed out, that D1 dead period is until April 15th. And so some people are not out visiting. So again, parents, there are relationships between coaches at different levels. Make the phone call. Oh, and Curtis said something fabulous. Find your fit. It's not D1 or bust. So find your fit. That should be every parent's guiding principle. You want to find your child's fit.